Really helpful for us in the work that we do in Glencree. We've seen it kind of throughout the years of using kind of a cultural event or something from the arts, a piece of theatre, to introduce a very difficult topic into the room. It's something that I think helps resonate with people in terms of the human experience and helps with their understanding of what happened. It also allows us then to maybe have some discussion afterwards of something that could be quite a sensitive topic.
I think this plays a reminder that there's no line thick enough to draw under our conflict or through our conflict. So I think it's that reminder that we are such a small place, that we've all known someone who lost their life or who was injured, and that this thing is very close to us all.
Those You Pass in the Street, the play that we're performing this evening, we first started touring it in 2014, which is really hard to believe. That's when it premiered, and it's still going. We have brought it to South Africa. We've performed it on the Genocide Memorial in Rwanda. We've performed it in Brussels, in Paris. We did a run at the Edinburgh Fringe. We performed it all over Ireland in multiple spaces. And what's interesting about it as a play, it's a really simple premise, and it's based on a grain of truth. The wife of a murdered RUC man walked into a Sinn Féin office for help with antisocial behaviour in the middle of the north of Ireland. That is the only bit of truth. The ripple effect and the fallout of that within her family and within her peer group is what the play is about. It deals with loss, it deals with death, it deals with the difficulty of moving forward, and also it really clearly articulates how 4 people who all seem to be at similar stages in their lives are all at very different stages when it comes to reconciliation. And that's why the play works.
Sometimes we don't have the words to really express what we're thinking, or sometimes the language to explain things. And I think that having a hybrid model like this, where you have a number of actors who are piquing our interest, who are actually maybe putting words on what it is that we want to say, so it makes it easier for us to kind of react to them and to be able for that kind of an interaction. And it also piques different interests and ideas and questions from other people in the audience. So in some way or another, I think that it often stimulates reactions between people. So it's not just about the play, it's about the play and the people, and it's about the people and the people. And also it was an opportunity to bring people from the South and to hear firsthand what people have suffered, whether they are loyalists or nationalists or Catholics or Protestants. That kind of, in a way, was missing, and in some way over those 50 years, I'm not saying that Glencree was the answer to everything, but it was a place where people could learn and could engage and go deeper into those questions.
These conversations are always very difficult, that you have to be conscious that the people in the room, that we have people in the room touched by the worst horrors of the conflict period. And while we all talk about the troubles and the conflict and the war in very general terms, to them it represents loss. It represents the present more than it represents the past, and I think quite often when we talk about the past, we think it's behind us, where in fact it's very tall, standing in front of us. So I think we walk in eggshells when we have these conversations. But I think it's important that we hear from those who have been hurt the most, because those who have been hurt the most are actually being asked to give the most.
At the end of the day, it's not for me or people my age, it's for our children and grandchildren, so that there is a better future for them. We can't have this hanging over our heads any longer. Do you know what I mean? There has to be some way of trying to sort things out. As I just said out there in the room, that basically there tonight we were all of the same kind of thinking, and that was good, and we all give our opinions, but you need to go for the higher stuff. The people who don't want to come in to watch that, who don't want to be reminded of what they've done. That is the only way you're going to break down the barriers.
I think our Parliament is trying to collectively deal with some of these issues, but clearly, until you hear and see the people speaking, it doesn't hit your heart, and it is very moving. And I think, you know, like having like the victims from Ballymurphy and obviously Alan from the Shankill, like they have huge testimony, which hopefully, you know, we'll hear again on our media, you know, because I think we need to hear what they have to say, because they have actually moved beyond, you know, just thinking of themselves. They're thinking of other people, I believe, and they're trying to find solutions, trying to understand, and that all pain is equal to everybody if you suffer it. It's you know, it's not about your religion or their religion. It's not about your politics. It's about human beings suffering and trying to come to grips with that and move on.
What we've experienced from our work is that there's no one-size-fits-all solution to the victim sector, to the experiences different people have had over many generations. You know, there's different people who want different things. It's why it's so contentious. It's why it's so difficult to reach a solution. But, you know, I think taking the approach where there's just one big, broad, sweeping brushstroke, it's been proven time and time again not to work. Different people want different things. Hearing their story, hearing what it is that's important for them, to be able to process what's happened to them and, you know, move forward in the way they want to in their lives. That's really, really important, I think, to these issues, but also to us in Glencree and the work that we continue to do with victims.
When we've gone into communities with powerful, quality, impactful pieces of theatre, the questions are asked, issues are raised that they've been trying to raise and discuss for a very long time. And that it's interesting that people, when they watch theatre that deals with the legacy of conflict, don't necessarily only address those issues. What they want to talk about is how we are all part of an inclusive society that addresses everybody's issues. We talk about questions of whether you have to forgive and forget if you want to move forward. Do you have the right to move forward as an individual? Where does your responsibility lie as regards your peer group, as regards your family, as regards your community? And all of those questions can be asked through theatre when it's produced in a careful, curated, considered way that is cognizant of the need not to re-traumatise.
You can sit and listen, and I think about a couple of days later you'll forget about it, but if you see it in action, it sticks with you. Because we, as part of the Ballymurphy group, we have had plays and walk in our shoes, different things done. And it was just powerful. We were able to help people understand what we were going through. So things like this are very, very good because it sticks there and it gets the message out there. People will come and listen to something like that quicker than going by a book.
Anything that gives people a better understanding is important. And while we recognise how close all of this was to all of us, people who watch the conflict from a distance, albeit not that far a distance from the conflict, maybe need a reminder in events like this, that it was this close, that it is this raw still, that it hasn't gone away, that it isn't going away, that there is no line that can be drawn, and that really, you know, those people with influence, including in the Irish government, need to be very vocal and very strong in the argument that we need a process that is real and creditable and genuine and not a unilateral solo run by the UK government.
I think in the Republic there's always been a kind of a blinkered view of what happens in the north, I think, but you find that a lot around the world as well, that I think people believe that once we found peace in 1994 with the first ceasefire, that all of a sudden everything was okay. And I think that a lot of people rely on the information that they receive from the media, and the media don't report it because they want the north to be a success. We are a very small landmass, and inevitably a lot of the victims and survivors from the north are living along the border area and living in the south, and so it's as much an issue for the whole of the island as it is just for the north.
Well, I think, you know, it's a misconception that, you know, a kind of peace process is, you know, that's it, signed with a peace agreement, that, you know, it's a line in the sand, it's a line in time. A lot of the work happens afterwards around the implementation of an agreement, but particularly for those who were victims, who experienced trauma during that. I mean, what we've seen through our work, you know, up to this very day, is that the issues that people experience, the trauma, the violence, it's still very important in their everyday lives. It's still something that has a massive impact on them mentally, you know, emotionally, physically, socioeconomically. It is something that, you know, our countrymen and women, our neighbours are suffering, that we need to be aware of it, we need to address it. I think with these sort of events, part of the importance of them, again, is hearing from the victims themselves for, you know, just creating the events in a certain way where you have political representatives or government leaders or senior civil servants who are there and able to listen and able to understand, so influencing policy where possible. Again, that the victims are able to tell their own stories and what they want, what they need to see happen in a way which are the right people, you know, in a way that's important to them. So I think organisations like Glencree, like this Peace IV funded Legacy of Violence project are so important to continue on that work.
I think we need to think more about the families and about closure is the wrong word, is how to make it a better island for all of them, particularly how they can inform us. And indeed, you know, I must say, from listening to Alan and having heard him as well, and indeed, you know, from other people as well, that the actual, they're looking out, they're not looking in, they are looking out. They're looking to, like, they recognise more than anybody, you know, the universality of the pain and how, you know, how much we have to change our society so that more people don't go back to that. I think was the theme, was we can't afford to go back to the next 30 years, have to be positive and constructive for everybody.
We have ignored a lot of what has happened as if it was nothing to do with us, and if it was another place and another time. And I think that it's time, well time, for us to engage with that a bit more deeply in the South. And I suppose in a way that Glencree itself is a peace centre. It's been there for almost 50 years now. And it was set up in the first place was to respond to the conflict in the north and to people running for the conflict at that particular time.
Some of the politicians do seem to take a bit of an interest, but overall I would say no, that basically it's like we're a different country. We're not part of Ireland, we're part of England. And then we have England who believe we're not part of them, we're part of Ireland. So we're caught in the middle of it all. But I think the south of Ireland could have in the past, and hopefully in the future, do a lot more for victims and survivors.
I've been involved in conversations of this type for years. And I've often said to people in politics and in government, the answers are in these rooms. I find that in these informal settings, if you like, much more truth is spoken. You know, if you said to someone, there's the Truth Commission, there are 14 judges in there and 95 barristers, they're not going to go into the room. Yet I have experienced in conversations like this, one story becomes the next story, and then the next story, and they become the threads that knit the whole thing together. So I can't stress just how important these conversations are, and that we have the people in the room who have been hurt the most in those conflict years and who still want answers and explanation and some better understanding, and some of them still want justice.
You get really moved by it, but it is unbelievably empowering. And we have heard conversations from people across the spectrum, every demographic, from young people aged 15 in Monaghan or Enniskillen to old women in Dresden talking about surviving the war. Ordinary members of the community and small single identity groups from everywhere from the Shankill to Derry to Mullabone to Cork, and all of them are dealing with the same issues, but a lot of them have never had the opportunity to talk about the thing that has caused them most pain and how difficult they find it to move on, and their concern about the generation coming behind them and how their biggest fear is going back to the violence.